Welcome, friends. Today we're diving into the extraordinary tale of Amara Chin, a young black woman from Ghana who escaped a web of deception with nothing but heartbreak and a one-way ticket. In a crowded train car, emotionally shattered and physically drained, she fell asleep against a complete stranger, Min Jun, one of Seoul's most feared Korean Mafia leaders. When she finally opened her eyes, she found herself caught in a world she never imagined, couldn't escape from, and now carries his child. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button if this is your first time here. Smash the like button and drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. Amara Chun could still remember what happiness felt like. Real happiness, the kind that filled her grandmother's small kitchen in Accra with the aroma of groundnut soup and fried plantains every Sunday. She could hear her father's deep voice telling stories that made everyone laugh until their stomachs hurt. Could feel her mother's gentle fingers braiding her hair while singing traditional GA songs passed down through generations. At 22, a sudden illness took her mother, and before Amara could even process that loss, her father died in a car accident just 4 months later. She attended 2 burials in less than half a year, watching distant relatives shed fake tears while mentally dividing up whatever little her parents had left behind. Then her aunt, her mother's older sister, appeared like salvation itself. "Come stay with me in Seoul," she'd offered. "I run a successful restaurant. You can help me manage it, make a fresh start, build something meaningful." Amara had accepted because staying in Ghana meant facing an empty house and memories that suffocated her every single day. Those first few weeks living in her aunt's tiny Seoul apartment seemed bearable enough. Aunt Grace smiled constantly, spoke about eventually making Amara a business partner, insisted she'd earn enough to perhaps open her own place someday. But those promises dissolved like sugar in rain. The smiles became suspicious glares. The partnership discussions never happened. Instead, Amara spent her days washing dishes in her aunt's struggling restaurant, delivering food orders to addresses she couldn't pronounce, working from sunrise until her muscles screamed while her aunt complained about costs and called her a burden. Amara kept telling herself to be thankful. She was alone in an unfamiliar country, speaking minimal Korean, broke, with no other options. Her parents' death had left only bills and grief. She depended entirely on her aunt's charity, and that charity seemed to shrink daily. But family was supposed to matter. Blood was supposed to mean something. That belief died completely one sticky evening when Amara returned unexpectedly early from a delivery run. The restaurant was locked up, but voices floated from the kitchen area. Her aunt's sharp tone mixing with a man's gruff responses. Amara moved quietly down the side hallway, not trying to eavesdrop, just hoping to reach the storage closet where she slept without being seen. What she heard turned her blood to ice. "I'm serious, Kim. The girl is worthless. Eats my food, uses my space, moves like a snail, gives me attitude with those sad eyes even when she doesn't say anything. You want to know the real tragedy? My sister died rushing to comfort her after she had some stupid boyfriend drama. If Amara had handled her own mess like a grown woman, my sister would still be breathing." Amara's hand flew to her mouth, catching the sound trying to escape. Her aunt blamed her. The woman who claimed to be family held her responsible for her own mother's death. "That's brutal, Grace." "Even by your standards," the man called Kim responded, sounding amused rather than shocked. "Maybe it is, but I've found an answer. There's this guy, Korean Mafia, extremely dangerous, insanely rich. He controls illegal operations all over Seoul. He needs a wife for appearances, something about looking legitimate for international business connections. He's offering serious money for a suitable foreign woman who'll stay quiet and play her role convincingly. I've already set everything up. You're selling your own niece. I'm giving her opportunities she could never create herself. The meeting is in 6 days. He's sending someone to evaluate her the day after tomorrow. It's already arranged." Amara didn't stay to hear anything else. She retreated silently, her pulse hammering in her throat. Her hands shook as she slipped into the storage closet, pulling the door shut so carefully it barely whispered. A forced marriage to some mafia criminal. In 6 days, her aunt would deliver her to a violent stranger who needed a decorative foreign wife. Amara would become merchandise, a business deal, something purchased and possessed. Unless she vanished first. Sleep never came that night. She lay on her makeshift bed staring at darkness, her thoughts spinning through impossible scenarios. She had almost nothing, just some cash she'd secretly saved from occasional customer tips, money her aunt didn't know existed. It wasn't much, but it might buy her an escape. Staying meant becoming someone's property. Running meant facing total uncertainty. But uncertainty beat captivity any day. By morning, her mind was made up. She would disappear. She had no idea where she'd go or how she'd make it work. But she'd rather take her chances than become someone's purchased bride. The following day crawled past like torture. Her aunt was gone making preparations, probably finalizing the sale of her niece like she was furniture. Amara used every second to get ready. She packed minimally, just her mother's favorite head wrap, one photograph of her parents, a couple changes of clothing. She counted her hidden savings 5 times. Enough for a train ticket going south, maybe enough to hide for several days while planning her next steps. When her aunt returned that evening, she was disturbingly upbeat. Someone's coming tomorrow to look you over. Put on something presentable. Try not to humiliate me more than your existence already does. Amara nodded submissively, eyes down, performing the obedient niece role one last time. That night, hours after her aunt's heavy snoring filled the apartment, Amara slipped away like a shadow. Her small backpack pressed to her chest, her heart pounding so loud she feared it would wake the neighbors. The train station was overwhelming even at this late hour. Harsh fluorescent lighting, announcements in rapid Korean she barely comprehended. Crowds moving with direction and confidence she couldn't fake. Amara felt invisible and terrified and completely adrift. But she pushed through the panic, located the ticket window, purchased passage south to Busan with trembling fingers. The train left in 80 minutes, just enough time to become invisible before her aunt discovered she was gone. She found a bench in the departure area, watching business people and families and elderly travelers. Everyone seemed to know where they belonged. Amara had never felt more out of place. She thought about her parents, wondered what they'd tell her to do. Her mother would hold her tight and promise it would be okay. Her father would crack some terrible joke to break the tension. But they were gone, and Amara was facing this nightmare completely alone. When boarding began, she joined the flow on autopilot, located her designated seat, car 7, seat 19C by the window, and sank into it clutching her backpack like armor. Train filled around her, a stream of faces and Korean conversations she couldn't decipher. She was drowning in spiraling fear, too overwhelmed to notice much until someone settled into the seat directly facing hers. The man who took seat 19D occupied space like he owned it. Tall, powerfully built, dressed head to toe in black. Designer black suit, black dress shirt. Even his expensive watch was black with a dark face. His features were all dangerous elegance, sharp jawline, penetrating dark eyes that seemed to catalog everything, black hair styled with effortless precision. He radiated authority and barely restrained danger. The kind of man who made rooms go quiet just by entering them. Amara made herself tiny, pressing against the window, avoiding any eye contact or acknowledgement. Men like him were trouble. She needed to be invisible. The train jerked forward, engines rumbling as they pulled away from Seoul Station. Amara stared through the window at city lights streaming past, her eyes stinging with tears she fought to control. She was abandoning the only place in Korea where she'd known anyone, fleeing from family who'd betrayed her, racing toward complete emptiness. The crushing weight of it pressed down on her lungs. She remembered her mother's soft voice humming while preparing meals, her father's large hands that could repair anything broken. The way their modest home in Ghana had felt safe and filled with warmth. She thought about her aunt's cruel words, blaming her, selling her. She thought about the Mafia boss she was supposed to marry, some monster who viewed her as a business asset. Tears escaped despite her best efforts, sliding down her cheeks silently. She turned harder toward the window, trying to conceal them, but her shoulders trembled with suppressed grief. The train accelerated, and Amara felt like she was abandoning everything that ever mattered, speeding toward a future without form or safety. Exhaustion slammed into her like a physical force. Days of terror and sleepless nights caught up simultaneously. Her eyelids grew impossibly heavy despite the crying. Her head started drifting, searching for rest, searching for any refuge from the chaos consuming her thoughts. Without intending it, without even registering it happening, her head tilted sideways and came to rest against something firm and warm, the stranger's shoulder. Minjun felt the weight settle against him and froze completely. He'd been reviewing encrypted messages on his phone, mentally strategizing for the territorial negotiation awaiting him in Busan. As one of Seoul's most notorious mafia bosses, his time was calculated in power and profit. His choices impacted hundreds within his organization and influenced entire underground economies. He didn't entertain distractions. He absolutely didn't allow spontaneous physical contact with random passengers. Yet this young foreign woman had just fallen asleep against his shoulder. His immediate reaction was to pull away sharply, wake her with the cold detachment that kept people frightened and compliant. But something stopped him. Perhaps it was the tear track still glistening on her dark skin, visible in the dim train lighting. Perhaps it was how her hands gripped that worn backpack like it held her entire existence. Perhaps it was the soul-deep exhaustion carved across her features, the kind that came from carrying unbearable weight. Minjun had constructed his criminal empire on strategic thinking, on assessing people with lethal precision. What he assessed now was straightforward. This woman was escaping something, and she was utterly alone. He made a choice that surprised even himself. He remained motionless, shifted his position slightly to better support her weight, and returned his focus to his phone. If she needed a brief moment of peace, he could allow it. It demanded nothing from him. The journey to Busan lasted several hours. Amara slept through most of it, her breathing eventually steadying, her desperate grip on the backpack gradually relaxing. Minjun found himself glancing at her more frequently than logical, noting details he typically wouldn't register. The way her natural hair was pulled back but coming loose from its tie. The calluses evident on her hands, even in sleep. The worn patches on her jacket. This was someone who'd experienced hardship. Someone currently drowning in it. When the train began decelerating for Busan Station, Amara stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding her expression as memory returned. Then full awareness hit, and she jerked upright, her face flooding with complete mortification. "I'm so sorry," she stammered in English, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and emotion. "I didn't mean to. I have no idea why It's fine," Minjun responded in flawless English, his tone neutral but not harsh. "You needed sleep." She looked at him properly then, and he observed the precise moment she registered what he represented. Dangerous, wealthy, completely outside her universe. Her embarrassment intensified, and she turned away quickly, fumbling with her backpack. The train stopped and passengers began the familiar routine of collecting belongings and moving toward exits. Minjun stood, retrieving his black leather briefcase from the overhead compartment with practiced efficiency. His men would be stationed at the terminal, his itinerary precisely coordinated. But as he stepped toward the aisle, he glanced back at the woman who'd used his shoulder as a pillow. She was still seated, staring at nothing, appearing utterly defeated. He should simply leave. He had business, territorial conflicts to resolve, an empire to manage. Involving himself with a stranger's troubles was illogical, potentially messy, possibly risky to his carefully controlled operations. Yet he found himself pausing. When she finally stood and moved into the aisle, he positioned himself close by, keeping her in his peripheral awareness. The Busan station was enormous and chaotic. People streaming in all directions with obvious purpose and destination. Amara stood near the main entrance, looking around desperately as though searching for something she knew wouldn't materialize. Minjun observed from a distance as two of his men approached, large men in dark suits who bowed with respect. "Boss, your vehicle is prepared," one said quietly. "One moment," Minjun replied, his eyes tracking the young woman. She'd begun walking toward the street exit, her movements hesitant and uncertain. He made another choice that contradicted his usual ruthless pragmatism. Follow her discreetly. Don't let her notice you. His men complied without hesitation. Minjun followed at a measured distance as Amara wandered to the pickup zone, stopping beneath the covered area, staring at the unfamiliar city ahead with an expression blending terror and despair. She had absolutely zero plan for what happened next. "Where are you headed?" Minjun asked, approaching her directly this time. She startled violently, spinning to face him with alarmed eyes. Recognition flickered across her features, followed by wariness. "Where are you headed?" he repeated. Mara hesitated, clearly weighing whether to lie. "I don't actually know yet." "You have no destination." "I have no place." The confession escaped before she could prevent it, and instantly she appeared to regret the admission. "I apologize. I don't know why I said that."
I'll figure out something.
"Thank you for allowing me to sleep."
I'm truly sorry about that.
She began walking away, but Minjun spoke again.
Come with me.
Amara stopped, turned gradually.
What?
"You have nowhere to go." "I have resources."
Come with me.
"I don't even know your name."
You don't know anything about me.
"Why would you offer that?" "Because you need assistance, and I'm providing it." His tone was matter-of-fact, like this was simply a business transaction. "I'm leaving now. If you choose to come, enter the car." He walked toward the black luxury sedan waiting at the curb, his men opening the door smoothly. Minjun slid into the back seat and waited, his expression revealing nothing. He told himself it was strategic calculation. She obviously needed help, and he had resources in abundance. It was no different than any other measured decision. But he also recognized that wasn't completely accurate. Something about her triggered a part of himself he'd buried long ago. The part that remembered fighting on the streets before clawing his way to dominance. The part that remembered being vulnerable. He'd constructed fortifications around that part through violence and calculated cruelty. But somehow this stranger had discovered a weakness. Amara stood frozen on the pavement, every instinct warning that following a strange, dangerous man was insane. But she also understood what awaited her alone on these streets. No money, no strategy, no safe shelter, exposed to every predator in an unknown city. At least this man had shown kindness on the train. At least he hadn't rejected her when she'd accidentally slept against him. That had to indicate something positive, didn't it? Or was she simply desperate enough to justify anything? The driver began closing the door, and Amara made her decision. She rushed forward, breathless and terrified, and out of alternatives.
Wait.
The door paused. Minjun looked at her through the opening, his expression revealing nothing. "I'll come with you," she said. "But if you try anything inappropriate, I'll scream and resist." "Understood?" He nodded to the driver, who opened the door fully. Amara climbed inside, her backpack pressed to her chest, her heart hammering so violently she thought he could probably hear it. The car pulled away from the station, merging into Busan traffic, and Amara understood. She'd just made a choice that might rescue her or ruin her. She had absolutely no way of predicting which. Minjun's residence was nothing like Amara anticipated, though she hadn't known what to anticipate. Some nightclub headquarters perhaps, or some fortress-like facility. Instead, the vehicle drove through progressively upscale neighborhoods until it passed through security gates into a property that stole her breath away. Traditional Korean architecture integrated flawlessly with cutting-edge security systems, creating something simultaneously stunning and menacing. Manicured gardens surrounded the primary building, bare winter trees standing sentinel, high perimeter walls, surveillance cameras positioned everywhere. "This is your home?" Amara asked, her voice barely a whisper.
Yes.
"You live here alone?" "I have household staff and security personnel, but fundamentally yes." He exited the vehicle and Amara followed on shaking legs. A woman materialized at the entrance, older with a stern demeanor, speaking quick Korean to Minjun. He responded briefly, then addressed Amara. "This is Mrs. Park. She manages the household. She'll escort you to a room." "A room?" I assumed maybe just a sofa or something temporary. You'll have a proper room. He checked his expensive watch, a gesture Amara was beginning to recognize as routine. There's a meeting tonight. Underground Business Assembly. I must attend.
You'll accompany me. What?
No, I couldn't possibly. Appropriate clothing will be provided. You have 45 minutes. He was already moving toward another section of the residence, extracting his phone. Meet me at the entrance. Amara stood paralyzed until Mrs. Park gently touched her elbow, gesturing to follow. The older woman guided her through corridors that felt like navigating through a dangerous museum. Everything beautiful and costly and vaguely threatening. The room she was assigned was larger than her aunt's entire apartment, with a bathroom featuring heated floors and a shower with jets from 6 angles. Shower, change, Mrs. Park instructed in broken English, indicating a garment bag suspended on a wardrobe door. 45 minutes. Then she departed, and Amara was alone in a Mafia boss's home, expected to attend some criminal meeting with a man whose complete name she didn't even know. This was madness. She should escape, run back through those gates, take her chances anywhere else. But she was so exhausted from running, and something whispered that if she left now, she'd regret it for the rest of her life. 43 minutes later, Amara descended the staircase, wearing a dress that likely cost more than she'd earned in a year. It was deep midnight blue, sophisticated yet understated, fitting her flawlessly in a manner that suggested either remarkable luck or someone had very precisely estimated her measurements. Her hair was still pulled back simply, but she'd managed to look somewhat presentable. She felt like an imposter, a fraud waiting to be discovered. Minjun was standing at the entrance, and when he glanced up at her, something shifted across his dangerous features, too fleeting to interpret. He changed into another black suit, this one with refined textures that caught ambient light. He appeared like he belonged in films about elegant criminals, not standing in his foyer waiting for a homeless runaway. You look appropriate, he stated. I have absolutely zero idea what I'm doing, Amara confessed.
Good.
Neither do I regarding this arrangement. He extended his arm, a surprisingly traditional gesture. Stay beside me. Don't speak unless someone addresses you directly. If anyone inquires, you're a business associate visiting from Ghana. That's deliberately vague enough to be secure. Precisely. The meeting was conducted at an exclusive club in Busan's most prestigious area, a location that radiated dangerous luxury. Amara had never witnessed so much concentrated authority and menace assembled in one space. Designer suits and couture dresses, jewelry that screamed wealth, an atmosphere of controlled aggression and criminal entitlement so dense it was stifling. She felt desperately misplaced, but Minjun maintained a firm, possessive hand at the small of her back, navigating her through the crowd with predatory confidence. People gravitated toward him instinctively. Other mafia leaders, compromised officials, businessmen with laundered money, all seeking his attention, his endorsement, his partnership. He maneuvered through the treacherous social terrain with the same deadly accuracy she imagined he applied to criminal ventures, giving each person precisely what they required while exposing nothing of his own intentions. Amara mostly stood alongside him, smiling courteously when introduced, contributing almost nothing verbally. She caught pieces of discussions, territory conflicts being negotiated, money being referenced in figures that made her dizzy, the subtle combat of the criminal underworld manifesting in civilized exchanges and premium liquor. It was both horrifying and captivating in equal measure. Sometime approaching midnight, Minjun guided her to a less crowded area where tables displayed elaborate arrangements of food and expensive alcohol. He handed her a glass of champagne, then selected whiskey for himself. You're performing well, he observed. I'm not performing anything. Exactly. You haven't embarrassed yourself or me. That constitutes success in this environment. Amara sipped the champagne, the bubbles sharp and unfamiliar against her tongue. Why did you bring me here? You could have simply given me a room and left me there. Because I required someone to accompany me and you needed clothing and safety. Mutually advantageous arrangement. That's not a genuine answer. He studied her then, truly studied her, his dark eyes examining her face with disturbing intensity. Perhaps I wanted authentic company, not the performance everyone else demands. Before Amara could process that revelation, someone called his name, and he was drawn back into the dangerous gathering. She remained where she was, sipping champagne that probably cost a small fortune, observing him navigate the room. He was magnetic, commanding, absolutely lethal. The evening blurred after that point. More champagne, more discussions in Korean she couldn't comprehend, more amazement at a world she never imagined experiencing. At some point, Minjun's hand discovered hers, warm and solid, grounding her. At some point, she stopped feeling quite so afraid. They departed the gathering sometime past 3 in the morning, both drained and slightly unsteady. The drive back was a fog of champagne warmth and murmured fragmented conversations. Amara found herself leaning into Minjun's substantial presence, her reservations dissolved by expensive alcohol and the intoxicating sensation of being protected, even if only temporarily. He smelled like costly cologne and danger. When his hand found hers in the darkness of the back seat, she didn't withdraw. His driver navigated through the gates, and they stumbled out together, Minjun's arm steadying her when she wobbled in her borrowed heels. They were both intoxicated, the world soft-edged and spinning, everything more amusing than it should be. "I can't recall where my room is," Amara giggled, even though she remembered perfectly. "This way," Minjun said, but instead of directing her to the guest quarters, they somehow ended up at his door together. She fumbled with the handle, and when it opened, they both tumbled inside, laughing quietly. The laughter dissolved as they stood in the dim light of his bedroom, suddenly acutely conscious of proximity. Amara looked up at him, her heart slamming against her chest, and saw something in his eyes that made her breathing stop. Not simply kindness anymore. Something deeper, darker, infinitely more dangerous. "Amara," he whispered, and then his mouth was on hers. Everything afterward existed in fragments. His hands gentle against her face, her fingers tangling in his hair, stumbling toward the bed, the world spinning beautifully, whispered words in Korean and English she couldn't quite remember later. Skin against skin, warmth and desperate hunger, and the sensation of being desired for the first time in what felt like forever. Then darkness, sleep, merciful unconsciousness. Amara woke to sunlight piercing through her eyelids and a headache that felt like her skull was splitting apart. She groaned, pressing her palms against her temples, attempting to reconstruct why everything hurt and why her mouth tasted like something died in it. Then she registered the weight beside her, the warmth. Her eyes shot open and horror overwhelmed her in crushing waves. Minjun was lying next to her, his dark hair disheveled, his muscular chest exposed above sheets twisted around his waist. Her dress from the previous night was discarded on the floor, his shirt draped across a chair. The implication struck her like a physical assault. Oh God. Oh God. What did we do? Her sharp intake of breath must have roused him. His eyes opened, briefly confused, then comprehension dawned across his dangerous features. He sat up abruptly, too rapidly, grimacing at what was likely his own headache. They stared at each other for a frozen, eternal moment. Two people recognizing they'd crossed a boundary that couldn't be reversed. Amara began, but no words would materialize. Minjun stood suddenly, grabbing his shirt from the chair, his movements jerky and unlike his typical controlled grace. His face was deliberately blank in a manner that somehow felt worse than anger. "I apologize," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "This was inappropriate. I shouldn't have." He didn't complete the thought, just walked out, closing the door behind him with a gentle click that felt like a door slamming on everything. Amara sat frozen in the bed, sheets pulled to her chin, staring at the closed door. Her hands were trembling. Her head was throbbing. Somewhere beneath the physical misery was a deeper pain, the certainty that she'd just destroyed the one positive thing in her life. What happened last night? What exactly did we do? She squeezed her eyes closed, attempting to remember, but the memories were hazy and disconnected. She remembered his kiss, his touch, the feeling of surrendering to something uncontrollable. But the specifics were lost in an alcohol-soaked blur. Had she wanted it? Had he? Or had they both simply been drunk and lonely and reckless? Amara pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped her arms around them, and allowed the tears to flow. Silent tears that felt like they might never end. She'd survived her parents' deaths, her aunt's treachery, fleeing with nothing. But somehow, this felt like the thing that might finally break her completely. 5 days later, Minjun asked her about her aspirations. They'd barely communicated since that morning, both meticulously polite, avoiding direct eye contact, pretending nothing occurred. But when he inquired what she wanted to pursue in Korea, Amara seized onto the question like a drowning person grasping a lifeline. Perhaps they could move past this. Perhaps they could return to before. Fashion design, she answered. I've always loved creating clothes, making beautiful things. Minjun nodded once. I'll make arrangements. Within a week, he'd secured a small boutique location in a respectable Seoul neighborhood, provided startup funding, connected her with suppliers, all businesslike and efficient, as if investing in her dream could somehow erase what transpired between them. Amara threw herself into the boutique project with frantic energy, working 18-hour days, exhausting herself so thoroughly she collapsed into bed too depleted to think. Minjun assisted with the same quiet efficiency he applied to everything, but there was distance between them now that hadn't existed previously. They'd lost something that night, even if neither could articulate exactly what. Weeks passed. The boutique opened. Amara should have been joyful. Instead, she was exhausted in a way rest didn't remedy. Her breasts ached persistently. Certain odors made her nauseous. One morning, she barely reached the bathroom before vomiting violently, her entire body rebelling. The pregnancy test she purchased 4 days later confirmed what her body already understood. 2 pink lines, unmistakable, unchangeable. Amara sat on the bathroom floor, the test gripped in shaking hands, and wept. Deep heaving sobs she muffled against her knees, terrified someone might overhear. She was pregnant with Minjun's child from one drunken night neither could fully recall. How could she tell him, the dangerous Mafia boss who'd rescued her, who demanded nothing in exchange, who'd been unexpectedly compassionate? He'd assume she trapped him intentionally, that this was some manipulation to secure his wealth, his protection. He'd look at her with revulsion, or worse, with cold assessment about how to handle the liability she'd become. She pressed a hand against her still flat abdomen, feeling nothing yet, but knowing everything had transformed. What am I supposed to do? What the hell do I do now? Days turned into a week. The secret burned inside her chest, growing more oppressive with every shared meal, every courteous conversation, every moment of his unknowing kindness. She caught him observing her sometimes with an expression she couldn't decipher, but he never questioned, never pressed. Amara stood in her boutique one evening, alone after closing, one hand resting unconsciously on her stomach. The test was concealed in her room, but the truth was inscribed in her body, in her exhaustion, in the nausea that arrived in waves. She had to inform him. That was the ethical thing to do, wasn't it? But every time she imagined the conversation, imagined witnessing his careful kindness transform into cold calculation of how she'd become a problem, her courage vanished. Should I tell him the truth or keep this secret and disappear before I ruin everything he's risked for me? The question tormented her as she locked the shop and returned to the compound that had become both refuge and cage, back to the dangerous man who'd saved her once and who she might be about to lose forever. What do you think? Should Amara tell Minjun the truth or keep her secret and vanish before it's too late? Drop your thoughts in the comments to find out what happens next. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already and rate this story on a scale of 1 to 10.